Hey kids, welcome to Rob's Red Hotspot, and welcome to a little No Man's Sky video. I've been playing lots of the World's Part 2 update, and lots of cool stuff. I wanted to make a video about kind of a weird thing that I think is often overlooked, and that is the signal booster. Now, most people, when they're navigating in No Man's Sky, they'll use these planetary charts, which will send you to points of interest. If you use the planetary charts outside of the atmosphere of a planet, they'll just pick a random planet and send you there, so you don't really have any control over which planet it goes to. If you use them in the atmosphere, they'll send you to a point of interest on that planet. You can also use like the exocraft scanners. So if you're looking for a particular thing like abandoned buildings, or if you're looking for crashed ships or crashed freighters, or maybe you're looking for monuments because you want to get Atlantic multi-tools, or maybe you're looking for portals, well, often you're going to use either the charts or the exocraft scanners to do that. But the one thing that those charts and exocraft scanners won't do, the other one that you can use is the economy scanner in the ships, which is very, very useful. The one thing that those charts won't do is find a point of interest that is like physically close to you on the ground, and the signal booster is pretty much the only way to do that. You can fly low and kind of use the ship scanner to find certain points of interest, but it's kind of clumsy and it doesn't work very well. The only other way you can find points of interest that are close to you is by using the signal booster. Now, obviously, you're not going to have any control over what kind of point of interest that it finds for you, so you might be kind of asking, well, what's the point? Like, why would I bother using the signal booster when I can just find a specific type of building and just fly to it in my ship? And for the most part, you're right. There's not much point to it. It's a lot of fun. It's a fun way to kind of explore planets. It's not really a particularly efficient way to get around if you're looking for specific things. It's a little bit glitchy, and I'll talk about some of the ways you can avoid some of its glitches. You get it quite early game, so this is also stuff that's very useful early game. Let's try it now and see what happens. So we're going to go in here, and it says locate nearby structures. Okay, it's going to go up like this. And did it find anything? Hopefully it'll find something close to us. Okay, we've got an observatory, and that observatory is 5 minutes away. So that's not super close. Usually it's a bit closer than that. That's probably about 2,000 units. But we can head over there and kind of repeat this process and see what we get. Just hop on my exocraft. By exocraft, it's only 1 minute away. Okay, and here we are at a tower, and you'll notice, you may not have seen it, but as I crashed into this with my souped up pilgrim here, you'll notice that there was a brief thing that displayed on the screen that said destination reached. And if you want to use the signal booster over and over and over again, you're going to have to wait until the destination reached thing appears. Otherwise, it won't find you another building, and it will just find the same building that you're standing right beside. You basically need to kind of clear the building. Sometimes you need to go inside the building, or you need to go close to it. In the case of buildings that have sentinel guards, like secure depots and manufacturing facilities, I find that you usually need to shoot at least one sentinel and potentially also talk to the terminal in the building. And the same goes for like beacons. You might need to activate the beacon, otherwise the signal booster will keep finding that same beacon. So you're going to need to play around a little bit with that, but for the most part, it's fairly reliable. So you might be asking, okay, but I don't really want to find like transmission towers. Like, that's not what I'm looking for. Why would I ever use the signal booster when I can just use a planetary chart? And there's one situation where it's really, really useful, and that is when you're trying to scan down creatures. So, you know, when you're scanning down creatures, like if we look at this planet here, it doesn't have any water on it. What has it got? 4 rare ground creatures. It's got 3 uncommon flying creatures that only fly during the day, okay? And it's got a rare underground creature that's always active, and an uncommon underground creature. So those of you who've tried to do this before, and you'll notice that if you get all the creatures, you actually get like 2,250 nanites. So it's a pretty big bonus. But a lot of the time what will happen is you'll find all the ground creatures just by wandering around. You'll find all of the flying creatures just by kind of looking at the sky and wandering around. And then you'll keep going in caves, and you won't find, especially the rare underground creatures, you won't find them. Like, it'll take you like hours and hours and hours. I've definitely spent at least like 2 or 3 hours looking for an underground creature. So I have a tip for you. do that's really going to help you find those underground creatures. And it's still not a super easy process, but this will save you a ton of time. And that is, once again, use the signal booster. Now, why would we use the signal booster? First of all, it's because if we're looking for the flying creatures and the ground creatures at the same time, getting in your ship and flying to a destination on the other side of the world by using like an exocraft scanner or or a planetary chart is actually going to take a fairly long time. Like, get in your ship, fly out of the atmosphere, pulse drive all the way around to the other side of the planet or wherever it sends you. Like, it doesn't usually send you somewhere nearby. Whereas the advantage of the signal booster is it sends you to a building that's relatively close to you most of the time. I'm going to drop the signal booster here and hopefully we'll get a site that's pretty close by. This planet doesn't seem to have a huge amount of buildings on it, but we're going to see. Okay, so it's worked properly, goes up into space. Oh, and it's found us an abandoned building, and it looks like it's actually closer than the last building it found. We are... yeah, 582 units away. Okay, so this is why I like to do this with an exocraft, because that's kind of the perfect distance to travel by exocraft. Like, it's a little bit slow to jetpack there. It's like almost worth getting in your ship, but like for 582 units, it takes 25 seconds to get there in an exocraft, so that's really worth doing. And why are we going to buildings when we're looking for underground creatures? That's might be what you're asking. And the reason that we're looking for buildings is if you look at... let's just get rid of the fog and cloud here so we can see a little bit clearer. If you look at the way that the game generates buildings on planets, yeah, it's still not very visible, you'll notice that the game flattens the terrain for a radius around buildings. So you see how the terrain around this, what is this? This is an abandoned building, yeah. If you look around this abandoned building, you'll see that there's this big circle of flattened terrain. Now, it doesn't seem to have created a cave here, but it creates these cave entrances. Whenever there's a building up against, there actually is a pretty big cave entrance up there. So we could run up there quickly and check for it, but often you'll see cave entrances that are right near where these buildings are. So it's one of the most effective ways of finding caves. And I also find that the game doesn't typically spawn creatures in regular cave entrances. This is just speaking from experience. The spawn of underground creatures is more reliable in these cave entrances near buildings than elsewhere, in my experience. Let's see what we get next and see if there's one of these caves I'm talking about there. That's a transmission tower, and it's 1,200 units away. So I'm going to tag this transmission tower before I get my exocraft so that I don't lose it. There's other points of interest that I've marked in this planet, so I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right one. We're going to zoom over here. And like, it's about a minute away. Again, could I have gone in my ship? Would that have been faster? Maybe. Up to you. But it's very close by. Here we go. This is a perfect example. So if you look at this here, so it says destination reach, so if I need to use the signal booster again, I can. But you can look at this here, how what it does is it flattens the terrain all around this building. And it's about, I don't know, maybe 150 units. So we've got a radius of about, yeah, 85 to about 100 units. It's like flattens, it's just perfectly flattened the terrain. And what that does is it tends to cut into the mountains that are beside the terrain. Like this, I know that this is not a cave, but you can see how like the terrain has been sort of sliced into by this flattening radius here. This land here is probably the underground biome. So let's scan this crab and see. Is it one of the underground creatures? Yeah, uncommon underground always active. So even though we're not in a cave, we've actually just scanned an underground creature. So that's, you know, you can see how the way that the terrain gets kind of modeled around these buildings is a much easier way to find caves. You can also do things like scanning down, what is it, subterranean relics or whatever they're called. There we go, subterranean relic. That's one way to find caves. But I find that creatures spawn more reliably in these underground biome areas that are close to buildings. For some reason, this is just a much more reliable way of finding underground creatures. So if we were looking for the other underground creature on this planet, we could scan another building here. And hopefully, most of the time, it's going to find something that's pretty close by. I find that you can usually do 9 or 10 buildings to in a row if you need to. Obviously, you're always hoping that it's going to be less than that, but 906 units. All right, so I'm going to grab my exocraft here. and it should take me just about 45 seconds to get over there. If you want to stop along the way and pick up some words or some salvage data, or, you know, maybe scan some of the plants or whatever it is you're kind of in the mood to do. You can also do a lot of stuff while you're doing this. You could potentially also go into the buildings, interact with them. Like, you can kind of hit two birds with one stone while you're doing this process. Okay, so this building doesn't really have a cave around it, but again, we can just keep repeating this process. It's one of the most effective ways of finding underground creatures, and that's the most useful thing about the signal booster. But I've often wanted to do some kind of cartography of the surface of planets in No Man's Sky, and so I did this interesting thing the other day where I used the signal booster going around the surface of a planet, and I marked down the X and Y coordinates of each of those buildings, and then I put them into Excel and actually turned them into a kind of makeshift map that shows us how the signal booster works. This is a little bit of a bonus that I wanted to put at the end of this video. I'm going to go to that planet now, and I'm going to show you the results that I got. So as we approach this planet here, you're going to see that there's two save beacons. We got one over there and one over there, and that's the beginning and the end of the trip that my signal booster took me on. So this is where I started my little signal booster journey here. I scanned down using the economy scanner on the ship. I scanned down this trade post, and then what I did is I used the signal booster, and I used it. I would go to a building and use it over and over and over again. We can see here this save beacon is about 16.5 minutes away. So I used my signal booster and I scanned down building after building after building after building, and I wanted to see how many buildings it would send me to before it screwed up, and I wanted to see what path it took and then chart those and put them on a map. Obviously this is something that you may or may not be interested in doing, but it's kind of interesting to understand how the signal booster works. So that's the results that it gave me. And what you're looking at is, if you look at on the right hand side of your screen, what you're looking at is the route that it took. So basically it sent me on this kind of zigzagging journey across this valley here. And there's a few things that you're going to notice. I'm just sort of driving towards the end point of the trip that it took me on. And you can kind of get a sense as we go up these hills how far it took me. It took me, I think, about 3,500 units or so. It's hard to estimate. But it took me kind of on this 15-minute drive from building to building to building. It did screw up a few times. If you end up going to one of the buildings that's guarded by sentinels, you need to attack those sentinels and clear the building. Otherwise, it will just keep sending you to that building. Like, it won't find any new things. But if you fiddle around with it a bit, you can usually get it to give you a result. And I managed to get 9 results before it sent me back to that original trade post back there. And at that point, it sent me to a trade post somewhere else on the planet. You can see this is one of the manufacturing facilities it sent me to. And so it's kind of interesting. One of the interesting things is that it sent me basically on, like, even though it did send me backwards a couple times to buildings I've already been to, but I would just go back to that building and then use the signal booster again, and it kept sending me in the same direction. So there's a lot of like interesting data we can glean from this about how the signal booster works. It does tend to send you to buildings that are but somewhere between about 300 and 1,200 units away, sometimes a little bit further if there's nothing nearby, but it really does send you to the closest building, I believe, in a certain direction, kind of along the ley lines of planets. So it's a really interesting way to explore. It's great for finding rare underground creatures. It is also great for just kind of like freewheeling and exploring around planets. If you don't really know what to do in the game and you don't know what you're in the mood for, just throw down a signal booster and see what it finds. Maybe take an exocraft and kind of roam around the building. And then, so I was able to do this kind of like really interesting little cartography project that sent me all the way over to here from where my ship is parked over there, 16 minutes away. I mean, it's actually more like 5 minutes by exocraft. Anyway, I wanted to show you guys this. It's kind of like pointless to make these maps like this, but I thought it was really interesting to see how the signal booster works. It's actually kind of a hidden gem in the game. So it's a really, really interesting tool that allows you to do that has a few gameplay functions. It's obviously not as efficient as some of the planetary charts if you're looking for specific buildings and stuff like that, but it's kind of an overlooked gem in this game, and I am a big fan of it. So that's really all I wanted to talk about today. I encourage you to play around with the signal booster and have fun exploring the planets on foot or by exocraft in the new Worlds Part 2 updates. Let me know what you think.